So, Parashat Balaq. If you're following in the Blue Chumash, you can open up to the Parashat on page, I'll tell you, on page 856. Okay, Parashat Balaq. So, Parashat Balaq is a fascinating parasha. It includes villains the like of which we haven't seen before, talking donkeys. It's really got all the elements of a great story. So, the opening of the parasha, in order to put this parasha in a little bit of perspective, as with any parasha, you have to remember the Torah wasn't given with the parashiot designated. The parashiot were designated by the Rahamim when they wanted to make Torah readings and schedule Torah readings. So it's somewhat artificial. So it's always instructive and important to look at what happened in the previous parasha before you jump ahead into the new parasha. Because the Torah doesn't have headings like this that say Parashat Balaq and a blank page in between to show you that it's a new parasha. These things are all connected. So what happened at the end of Parashat Chukat? Does anybody know what the last thing that Bnei Israel did at the end of Parashat Chukat? So they did what the first step of kibush, the first step of conquering the land, which was conquering Sichon and Og, the land of the Transjordan area, okay, which eventually Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven end up settling there, but that's not yet. At this time, that's what's happened. So the Jews have had their first very decisive, very overwhelming military victory, right? Unexpected against the two superpowers. It would be like if some band of nomads was able to overthrow the United States of America. Okay? They went up against the two most powerful kings and armies in the region with no military training, no clear evidence of any weapons. We don't know exactly how they pulled off the battle. It doesn't give us details, but they were able to do it. All we know is that any bystander, the survivors are very afraid, including Balaq. And that's how our parasha opens. Vayar Balaq ben Tzipor et kol asher asay Emori. So Balaq saw everything that Israel did to the Amorites. He saw everything that the Jews had done, and of course he becomes worried. What is he worried about? Right, I'm next. Who's next in line? These people are lahavdil. Like the German expansion. They just kept going and going and going and going and pushing the military front along. So Moab thinks we're the next victims. I mean, this empire is going to extend over our territory. Now, it happens to be, we know that the Bnei Israel were told not to take any land from Moab. They're not going to take the land of Moab. They're not going to take the land of Ammon. And in fact, in last week's parasha, the Torah specifically tells us that the reason why, even though some of that territory was once possessed by Moab, since it was captured later by Og and Sichon, it wasn't considered to be Moabite land, and that was why the Jews were allowed to take it. But normally they wouldn't be allowed to take the territory of Moab. So really he has nothing to worry about, but he's worried anyway.
They didn't know that.
Yeah, they didn't know that. There was no way for him to know that. So he decides to hire not a mercenary army, not more soldiers, because he sees that there's no way to go up against this force of these Bnei Israel. No conventional warfare is going to repel them, because no warfare is going to be better than the warfare supplied by the armies of Og and Sichon. And they weren't able to do it. So I've got no hope then. So what can I do? I've got to pull out some other kind of strategy. And what does he decide to do? Natural means are not going to vanquish Bnei Israel. So what's going to work? Some kind of supernatural, right? I got to call in my miracle worker, Bilaam. Bilaam is from, Aram Naraim. He's from a totally different place. But he summons Bilaam to come. And Bilaam, we know, tries to curse Bnei Israel 3 times. And finally he gives up, right? He attempts to curse them, and every time the curse becomes a beracha. But Bilaam is a very interesting character, and what I wanted to spend a little bit of time exploring tonight was, what is the character of Bilaam? He's so unusual, because on one hand, he's invoking Hashem's name all the time. So for example, if you look at Pasuk Het, okay? What do they say to him actually? In Pasuk Vav, Okay, Pasuk Vav. This is the message that Balaq sends to Bilaam. He says, "Ve'ata lechana ara li et ha'am hazeh, ki atzumu mimen." Please strike this nation because they are more powerful than me. We're on page 856. Ulai uchal nakebo va'agarashenu min haaretz. Maybe I'll be able to strike against them and drive them out of the land. Ki yadati et asher tivarech mivorach v'asher ta'or yu'ar. Because I know that anybody you bless is blessed, and anybody that you curse is cursed. Now, does that phrase remind you of anything else in the Torah by any chance? Huh? Avraham Avenu. Right? Mivarechecha baruch. Right? Anybody who blesses you. Va'avarecha mivarechecha umkalelcha or. Right? Anybody who blesses you is going to be blessed. Anybody who curses you is going to be cursed. So it's not exactly the same idea, but the language is very similar. It certainly evokes a memory of Avraham Avinu. And we're going to see that there are a lot of things about Bilaam that actually are reminiscent of Avraham Avinu. Now, Bilaam's answer is very religious. So they come to Bilaam and they tell him the message. And in Pasuk Chet, what does he say? Very religious. I don't do anything without the blessing of Hashem. I'm a very religious guy. So please stay overnight. Hashem will come in a dream and tell me what I'm allowed to do. And the Sarei Moab stay with Bilaam. Now we talked about one of the evenings, why the Sarei Midian don't stay, but that's another story. Page 858. So Vayavo Elohim el Bilaam. So in fact Hashem does come to Bilaam and he says to him, who are these people? And Bilaam says, Balaq ben Sipor melech Moab shalach ilai. Guess what? I'm a big shot. Because one of the most powerful kings in the region summoned me, and he asked me, "Hine ha'am hayotze miMitzrayim vaychas et ein haaretz, ata lecha kavali oto, ulai uchal lehelachem bo, or lehelachem bo v'gerashtiv." Okay, what does lehelachem bo v'gerashtiv mean? So Bilaam says that Balaq asked me, this nation that came out of Egypt and they're covering the whole ground. You can't see the ground because they cover them. It's such an enormous group of people. Well, Balaq asked me to come and curse them. Maybe he'll be able to fight against them and drive them out. Okay? And what does Hashem say? God says to Bilaam, don't go and don't curse them because it's not going to work. They're already blessed. And remember, so far Bilaam, if you're reading this parasha, what do you think about Bilaam? He probably goes to the early minyan every day, shacharit, puts on 3 pairs of tefillin. Very religious guy. He says, I won't do anything without what Hashem says. I'm going to wait to see what Hashem says, only what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. He's more religious than most of us, right? He gets up in the morning. Now, what would you expect Bilaam to tell the messengers of Balaq? What should he tell them?
I won't go with you. That it's a wrong thing to do to criticize other people who looks like they've been blessed the whole time.
So he should have gone to them and said, what Hashem said was, don't curse this people because they're blessed. That's what Hashem actually said, right? That's what he told them. What does Bilaam do? He says, Vayakom Bilaam baboker vayomer al sarei Balaq lichu el artzechem ki me'en Hashem letziti ladochim lachem. That's a very vague statement. What does that mean? Go back to your land because Hashem refuses to let me go. Is that really what Hashem said? I refuse to let you go with these people? That's literally what he says is that he said I can't go with you guys. Right? La'aloch imachem. Is that what Hashem said to him?
No.
Not 100%, right? There's a very significant omission here. What was the actual message?
Don't curse them.
This is the wrong thing to do. You can't curse them because they're blessed. Why doesn't he just tell them that? He wants to leave his options open, right? Well, let's see what they do next. Maybe they'll come back with a better offer. I can negotiate. Maybe I can negotiate with Hashem. Who knows? I don't want to show all my cards the first time. That's not the way to do a negotiation. Bilaam's a businessman. Right? He doesn't show the full real story. The full real story would mean game over. That's it. Hashem said no, the people are blessed, there's no point in cursing them. And he would have no other option. He can't then come back and say, actually I reconsidered, I can go with you. There's no way he's going to be able to turn that around. So he makes it as vague as possible. Is that really an authentically religious guy? No, it starts to make you wonder how religious this guy is, Now, it's very, Rashi brings a couple of things about Bilaam that are really fascinating He says, first of all, that Bilaam actually hated Bnei Israel more than Balaq. How do we know that? Because in Pasuk Yud Aleph, when Bilaam describes what Balaq asked of him, he says that Balaq asked me, Vegerashtiv, let me drive them out. Okay, what did Balaq actually ask him? He said, what I would like to do is to have a situation where Va'agarashenu min haaretz, I just want to drive them out of the land. In other words, I want to get them away from me. Okay, La'archik otam, I want to separate from them, get them away from me. He didn't say to get them completely away to destroy them. He said, I just want to make them, create some separation here. What did Bilaam say? Vegerashtiv, which sounds like get them away from the world. What does Rashi say? Min ha'olam ubalak lo amar alavar garshin amaratz an eni mevakesh lasem me'alai ubilam haya son'am yoter mibalak. That's the thing that the Chazal say, that Rashi quotes. Bilaam actually hated Bnei Israel more than Balaq. Why would he hate the Jews? What did they ever do to him? What does Bilaam have against the Jews? Balaq, we understand, it's self-preservation, self-defense. He thinks that his life's being threatened, right? And anybody whose life's being threatened, they have a right to try to mobilize whatever means to protect themselves. So we're sympathetic about Balaq. He's afraid. He's legitimately afraid. It's a sincere... He's not anti-Semitic, Balaq. No, he just says that these people are obviously on a rampage. They're wiping out all the people in this area, and I'm afraid that I might be next on their list. That's a legitimate concern. But Bilaam is coming from a totally different part of the world. He's coming from Mesopotamia. And all of a sudden, Rashi is telling us he actually hates the Jews more than Balaq. Where would he get that from? That's very unusual. Let's go on and see if we can figure out why. So, if we go back, actually, there is one interesting Rashi that we skipped. That Rashi asks, why did Hashem allow a person like Bilaam to have any kind of prophecy? This is in verse, Verse Hey. Rashi says, V'im tomar, mipnei ma yishra kadosh baruch hu shechinato al goy rasha. Everybody asks this question, right? Why did Hashem give a prophecy to such a low-life guy as Bilaam? He talks the religious talk, but at the end of the day, he's not very religious. So what's the story? He doesn't want to give the opportunity to the nations of the world to say, you are not a fair God. Why not? Because you sent all those prophets to Bnei Israel. They had Avraham Avinu, they had Yitzchak, they had Moshe Rabbeinu. What do we have?
Nothing.
They had nothing. Hashem says, no problem. I'll send you a Navi. Who does he send them? Bilaam. And what happens? He gives them prophets. Not only was Bilaam not good for them, he lowered their level of morality, because at the end, what does he tell them to do? Oh, send your daughters out to seduce Bnei Israel. That's how you're going to I can't curse them, but if you cause them to sin, then Hashem will punish them. Is that what a Navi is supposed to do? Find a way to harm people, to lower their moral standards, tell them to prostitute themselves? That's what a Navi does? Certainly not. And yet that's what the Navi did. But wait a second. There's still a problem with this Rashi, because that was Bilam's own choice, right? So Bilam was a bad apple. He was a bad seed. But does that really answer the question? I mean, why can't Hashem send him another Navi then? Okay, you said they'll say, well, you sent us a bad seed. They still have an argument, right? You didn't send us a good Navi, you sent us a bad one. I mean, that's still not fair. So how does it answer the argument that Bilam was sent to them when Bilam obviously is a bit of a creep, right? He's not a very good guy. Well, let's hold on to that for a second. Let's go a little further and see what else our friend Bilam does. So, of course, he receives a further delegation from the king of Moab. And this time, Balaq really implores him to come. Don't refuse to come, please come. Bilam says, even if Balaq gave me his whole house full of silver and gold, I can't go against the word of Hashem. Wow. What a religious guy. He certainly sounds very pious, right? Now, if you met Bilam, what would you think? He's like a guru or something. He's like a holy man, right? He's like one of the Babas. Right? But what's really going on behind the scenes is not really what seems to be going on the surface, right? On the surface, he's all, Hashem is not, anything Hashem says, I would never go against Hashem. But then, at night, he's getting the actual message and he's not relaying it. So it's only what he decides to, for public consumption, should be released. So he's a little bit of a two-faced guy. But then he says, wait another night, let's see what Hashem is going to say this time. And of course Hashem says this time, if the people have come to call for you, go with them. Okay? But remember, whatever I tell you to say is what you're going to say. Now what could Bilaam have done? You're Bilaam. Hashem told you, first of all, don't curse the people because they're blessed. Second of all, if you want to hang out with these guys and go to a nice barbecue by at Balaq's house, feel free. But whatever I want you to say is what you're going to say. So, what are you going to do in the morning?
I would go.
You would go? Well, for the barbecue, maybe, right? Right, but if you, but
Bilaam, it's giving him a choice.
Right,
Bilaam.
Bilaam knows that he can't do the job. He should have gotten up in the morning and said, "Listen, guys, I'm happy to come to your barbecue, but the only thing is that I'm telling you right up front that I can't curse the people. I can only bless them." That's the truth. He already knows that. He's been told, right? He's been told, but he keeps hoping against hope that somehow he's going to be able to
maybe
work something out here, right? He keeps hoping, and so we find that Bilaam doesn't fully divulge whatever he knows. This is very important. Hold on to that idea too. Then it says, "Vayakom Bilaam baboker vayachavosh et atono." Bilaam gets up in the morning and he saddles his donkey. Who else gets up early in the morning and saddles their donkey to go to a mountain? Avraham Avinu. Right? So Bilaam, and what does Rashi say? Amar says, "Mikan shasina mikalkelet et hashura." There's a saying in the Chazal, "Ahava mikalkelet et hashura," and also "Asina mikalkelet et hashura." That procedure, formality, is oftentimes set aside when you really are hateful or when you really love somebody. When you really love somebody, you let go of formality. You might do something yourself that normally you would delegate to somebody in lower position. And so too, when you really you have a lot of hatred, you have a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, you also might saddle your own donkey in order to go do something, to rush out to do something that you feel very passionately about, even if normally you would have your servant do. So then he says, "Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Rasha, Kvar Kadmach Avraham Avihem." Don't think that you're going to be able to outsmart Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu already got up in the morning with his donkey, and in his zechut they're going to be protected. But you see from this what? Bilaam is being compared to, in some way, Avraham Avinu. That's not the only way. He comes to a mountain, and when he comes to the mountain, he builds all these mizbachot, right? Shiva mizbachot. And if you look at what does Rashi say? Why did he build 7 altars? What was the idea of building the 7 mizbachot each time that he tells to Balaq? So Rashi says, what's the reason? This is on verse Daled on page 864. Rashi says, "Shiva mizbachot arakti." Okay, he says, "Et shiv'ata mizbechot." It doesn't say shiv'a mizbechot. I made 7. I set up 7 altars. It says the 7. What does it mean, the 7? Amar lefanav avoteim shel elo banu lefanecha shiv'a mizbechot v'ani arakti keneged kulan. He says, if you count up all of the altars that the avot made, Avraham made 4. If you count them up, okay. Yitzchak made 1, and Yaakov made 2. So that comes out to 7. I brought 7 mizbechot myself, so I'm equal to all the avot. So Hashem, you should, bend your rule a little bit. And then va'al par va'il b'mizbeach, because Bilaam says this to Hashem: I have made these 7 mizbechot, and I have brought par va'il, a bull and a ram on each one of these altars. So now give me a message. And of course, the message is not what he wants to hear. But he says, ve'Avraham lo ela ayil achat. All Avraham put was 1 ram, right? When he didn't sacrifice Yitzchak, he only put 1 ram in place of Yitzchak. I put a bull and a ram, so look, I'm much better than Avraham Avinu. So you should listen to what I want, and what I really need out of here is a nice klala, a nice curse, so I can collect my paycheck. So please, deliver me. Help me out. So Avraham Avinu and Bilaam both come from the same neighborhood, by the way, Aran Harai. Avraham Avinu and Bilaam both get up in the morning very early, to do their task, what they feel that they're called to do. Avraham and Bilaam both are building mizbachot and calling out in the name of Hashem.
Who was it?
And in fact,
who was in the same neighborhood? Bilaam
and Avraham is from the same place before a long time.
Was a part of he was a Canaanite also.
Many years before.
He was a Canaanite also.
Avraham.
No, what about Bilaam? He was also part of a Canaanite. He got cursed, right?
Who?
All the Canaanite, yeah. The Canaanite got cursed.
Bilaam? I don't know what it doesn't tell you what his. He might not have been. He might not have been a Canaanite though. No, because from Avraham Naharaim.
No, you just said they were neighbors, right?
Yeah, in the birthplace of Avraham Avinu, but not in there. Yeah, in the birthplace of Avraham Avinu. Yeah. So just to expand on this theme, so you all are familiar with Pirkei Avot, right? We all love Pirkei Avot. So there's a very famous saying in Pirkei Avot, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, that's very perplexing. It's really strange, and it's in Pirkei Avot, Perek Hamishi, the 5th chapter. It's Mishnah Kaf. It's Mishnah number 20. Kol mi sheyesh bo shlosha dvarim halalu. Mitalmidav shel Avraham Avinu. Anybody who has 3 characteristics is one of the students of Abraham, Avraham Avinu. Ushlosha dvarim achirim u mitalmidav shel Bilaam harasha. If you have 3 other characteristics, you're one of the students of Bilaam. Who knew that Bilaam had a school, yeshiva. Ayin tova v'rach nemucha v'nefesh shefala. If you have a good eye, which means that you're generous. Ayin tova doesn't mean you can see well, right? Having a good eye, that's sometimes what we mean. It means ayin tova means you're a generous person, and ruach nemucha means you're not arrogant, right? You are a person of a humble person. V'nefesh shefala, and the low spirit. Mitalmidav shel Avraham Avinu. That's a student of Avraham Avinu. Ayin ra'ah v'ruach givoah v'nefesh rahava. If you have a bad eye, which again doesn't mean that you need glasses or a better prescription, it means that you are stingy, and ruach gavoa, and you have a high spirit, meaning you're arrogant, v'nefesh rahava, and a wide soul. You know what a wide soul means according to the Mefarshim? It means you're greedy, meaning you're very wide, you can't be satisfied, you want more. Nefesh rahava. So he says, this is me telling me that shall Bilaam harasha. These are the students of Bilaam, the wicked one. Ma ben talmidav shel Avraham Avinu talmidav shel Bilaam harasha. What's the difference between the students of Avraham Avinu and the students of Bilaam harasha? The wicked Bilaam. Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu ochilin ba'olam hazeh v'nochilin ha'olam haba. Students of Avraham Avinu get to benefit in this world and the next world. Shene'emar la'nochil ha'vayesh v'otzorotei ma'amalei. Fine. Aval talmidav shel Bilaam harasha yorshin geino v'yordin lebeshahat. But the students of Bilaam experience suffering in this world and in the next world, and they go down to the pit. So this is really an interesting Mishnah, right? Why is this an unusual Mishnah? Well, isn't there something a little bit odd to be comparing two people of totally opposite people? Why are we comparing the students of Avraham Avinu to the students of Bilaam? Why would we think that these two characters should in any way be compared to each other? It's like, okay, tell me the difference between the students of Hillel and Shammai. Okay, these are two Talmidei Chachamim. They have yeshivot. They're teaching students. Oh, what are the difference? Oh, one group is this way, one group is that way. But here you're talking about students of Avraham Avinu, a great Sadiq, the greatest of the Avot. That person versus Bilaam. I know what the difference between Avraham and Bilaam is. One is a good guy, one is a bad guy. Why is it asking Ma ben Talmidav shel Avraham Avinu, the Talmidav shel Bilaam? It should be pretty obvious that the students of Avraham are the good guys and the students of Bilaam are bad guys. Why do you have to tell me there are 3 characteristics that differentiate Avraham from Bilaam? I would hope there's a lot more fundamental thing that differentiates Avraham from Bilaam than that. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like saying, I don't know, to think of the worst person you could imagine. I don't want to put any names, but the worst person you can imagine, comparing them to the best person. There are 3 things that differentiate a perfect tzaddik from a neo-Nazi. Really? There's only 3 things? They have nothing to do with each other. So why would you even think to make a whole Mishnah to compare, let's say, a perfect tzaddik and a suicide bombing terrorist? We need to know what the 3 things are that differentiate them. There's nothing to do with each other. Right? It's totally different. It's a strange Mishnah. Like I would really compare these 2 people. So I want to suggest, and I think this is really the key to understanding Bilaam. It's something that when you read the story of Bilaam, you can appreciate it at a different level. Bilaam is a person who, for what it's worth, for better or for worse, why did the Chazal say that Hashem sent the Nevi to the Umot HaOlam? He sent the prophet to the nations of the world, and it turned out to be a bad guy. Because what makes Bilaam unique is that he understands more than everybody else. In other words, he knows the reality that he doesn't have control over a situation, but he also knows that people desperately want to believe that he does. And so he manipulates that to his advantage. Ibn Ezra says a very interesting thing. He says, you know how Bilaam was so successful? He was actually a great chacham. A great chacham. And he would come, like the famous story about, I forget which explorer it was. It might have been Columbus or one of the other explorers, that he came to the Native Americans and he said, and he knew that there was going to be an eclipse, and he predicted it, and then they said, oh, he brought the eclipse, because he said something, and then an eclipse came and it scared them, and then they believed he had the power. So Ibn Ezra says that's how Bilaam worked. He understood things very well. He analyzed market trends really well and told people, I'm going to curse this, I'm going to curse the real estate market and it's going to plummet. And then everyone said, wow, look, Bilaam. I mean, of course, using an example from today, but something like that. He would curse, he would see a certain nation was imploding for whatever reason. He saw that they were going in a bad direction, the leadership was poor, and it was headed for a descent into chaos. And he would curse them and say, "Oh, look, see, I cursed them, and look what happened. Terrible things happened to them." He didn't really do it. You understand? But that's what Ibn Ezra says how Bilaam worked. So what do you see, though? It's that Bilaam had an understanding of things way beyond other people. Way beyond other people. And he did believe in Hashem. He recognized that the world actually works by chokhmah. The world actually works by wisdom. Which is what Avraham Avinu brought to the world, isn't it? Except Avraham Avinu said, I have this idea that Hashem is one, and all of the superstitions that people are doing, and all of the avodah zarah, and believing in these miracle workers is all shtuyot. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to proclaim it to everybody. I'm going to tell everybody, don't listen to these charlatans. This is all fake. This is all nonsense. Hashem is really the one. All of this avodah zarah and the magic that you're doing and the rituals, it's just enriching the priests. It's all fake. It's all false. I want everyone to know that it's false. What could Avraham have done? He could have said, hey, I have an inside track that nobody else has. I understand people very well and their desire, their need for these magical rituals and their need to believe in some holy kind of person. And I understand how the world really works, that all of this avodah zarah is a bunch of nonsense. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to manipulate that to my advantage. I'm not going to tell anybody. Do you know who does that kind of thing? The people who are mediums. Who, they bring people and they say, oh, I can speak to your dead relatives for you. Right? You know those people?
Yeah.
They are actually very smart people who understand how desperately people want to be able to connect with their deceased relatives. They are able to read the clues that people show with their body language and what they say, and to ask leading questions. So really, if you watch videotapes of what they do, they say very little. And it's really the person who's having the reading done that says a lot of the information.
They pull you up.
Yeah. They are able, it's called cold reading. They're able to get you, there's also such a thing as hot reading, which is where they wiretap the room and they have you're talking to somebody in the room and they don't realize, and then when you come out, the guy knows the information from beforehand. That's even more sneaky. That doesn't require as much intelligence. The people who do it, like John Edwards or whatever, he actually is very skilled at doing it. He's able to, and what does he say? I sincerely just want to help everybody to be happy and connect with their deceased relatives. I care so much about the people. So I have a special talent that I want to share with the world. Aren't I a nice guy? And just give me my multi-million-dollar contract for my television show, and that's all I ask. Besides that, I don't need anything else. I'm just here to help people. So, this kind of, it's like when one of the psychics from one of those Psychic Friends networks got sued for something, and I remember that the New York Post, which always has really great headlines, said something like, she should have seen it coming, because she was supposedly a psychic. Okay? But the point is that these people, they understand a lot of things about how people work and how things work. They're very smart. But instead of saying to somebody, listen, I'm sorry that your relative passed away, and unfortunately there's no way for us to contact people beyond the grave. Maybe you need a therapist or something, or you want to talk about it, or let me help you through your difficult time. But giving them some fake thing is only good if it enriches you. Right? So Avraham Avinu and Bilaam are similar in a very fundamental way. And that's actually what the Torah is showing by comparing them. And that's actually what why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot is telling you this. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot is telling you that actually Avraham Avinu and Bilaam are not that different in a very important way, which is they both are Yechidim B'Doram. They both are unique in their generation. That they have an insight, they have a perspective and a clarity that nobody else has. But whereas Bilaam uses it for the superstitious or the spiritual equivalent of insider trading and basically takes advantage of what he knows and doesn't reveal it to anybody else, Avraham Avinu tries to educate people and get them away from Avodah Zarah. Bilaam says, no, now that I'm liberated from Avodah Zarah and I understand how things really work, I'm going to manipulate these primitives to believe that I'm the holy man. Because I understand how how they work and how the world works a lot better than they do, because they think that these magical rituals are what make things happen, and I know how it really works, so I'll be behind the scenes making things happen, or I'll be able to predict things are going to happen, and they'll think that I'm responsible for it. And because they're simpletons, they'll fall for it. Whereas Avraham Avinu would never do that. Avraham Avinu wants to educate people and liberate them also from the false belief. So that's what Pirkei Avot is saying. Pirkei Avot is saying what really distinguishes Bilaam and Avraham Avinu is not their understanding of the world. They're both great Rahamim. Great Rahamim that tower over everybody else in their generation because they're able to see past the superstitious beliefs that dominated the world. There was no other belief at that time. Everything was superstition and magical beliefs. There was no scientific belief that, there's one God who created the world with chokhmah, and if we just use our mind, we could see. There was no such concept. Only Avraham and Bilaam knew. Okay, so to speak. Only the Jewish people and Bilaam knew this. And what did Bilaam do with it? Because he had ayin ra'ah, because he was stingy, because he had ruach givoah, he was arrogant, because he had nefesh rechava, he was selfish and greedy, he wanted to use his knowledge to enrich himself. But Avraham Avinu had the same understanding, and because he had the ayin tova, he was generous, he wanted to share what he had. He had ruach nemucha, he was humble. And he had the nefesh shifala, he didn't ask for much, he wasn't looking to make money or make a business off of it. He was genuinely looking to help other people. So what did he do with the knowledge that he had? He made it available to everyone. It's like today. You have many things like this today. That intellectual property, right? So some people you have to pay, for everything. You have to pay if you want to be able to read the articles. You have to pay if you want to have an education. And now the revolution is that now on the internet you can find so much information out for free. And people put so much out there and make so much available for no cost. And and this compromises some industries. For example, the music industry is very, very protective. Because if you can get everything for free on YouTube, why would you bother paying $15 for a CD or not download it? So, making things available for free and making it public property can undermine those people who are trying to make money off of it. And in this case, particularly in the case of the spiritual world, if you're educating people and making them civilized, so to speak, in other words, giving them a sophisticated way of looking at the world, that they're not going to be seduced by Bilaam anymore. They're not going to believe somebody like Bilaam anymore. You are putting Bilaam out of business. Education is the greatest enemy of every psychic, every supposed magician, every miracle worker in the world, every cult leader in the world. Education is the biggest enemy of those people, because the more educated people are, the less they're going to be willing to believe that kind of nonsense. And that's what Bilaam realizes. So now you can understand why Rashi says Bilaam hates the Jewish people more than Balaq. Because for Balaq, it's just a matter of survival. He just wants them away from him. Go do something else. Just don't bother me. Just don't threaten me. Bilaam says, the existence of the Jewish people is a threat to me. Because if there's a nation proclaiming to the world that everything that I have been able to benefit from and everything I've been able to manipulate to my advantage, if someone's going to reveal the truth, well, that's going to destroy me. That's going to destroy my life. And that's what happens with all of these cult leaders. When people come out and start revealing, what really goes on behind the scenes and what's really happening, they get there. You remember that guy? There was several years ago, it's got to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. Most of you were not around for the original, but or you probably didn't see the original, you were too young. But there was a guy who revealed the secrets of magic. Okay? The show still, it's in reruns sometimes. I think it was a Fox TV. Not Fox News, regular Fox. And this magician put on a mask, so nobody knew who he was. Have you ever seen that? And I forget the name of the show, but it's like Magic Secrets Revealed or something like that. Yeah, it's a series. And he basically...
They do the trick.
Right, they do the trick and then they show you behind the scenes how they actually do the trick.
Yeah.
And you know what? Not only did he have to wear a mask, he had to have a voice changer because he got death threats from magicians. So he actually his life was in danger. He had to be protected because they said, you are undermining our livelihood. The way that why do people think it's so impressive when you saw through the girl and then she's really whole, afterwards or whatever they do? He said it's only because they believe it was real. But if they're not if they know what's really going on behind the scenes and they know it's just a trick and they know how the trick works, then the whole thing is it's not going to be interesting anymore. So the same thing, but even more with Bilaam. Okay, Bilaam is saying the whole way that I'm presenting the world is that things work in a magical kind of arbitrary way, and that I play a role in determining the future. When really that's not true. But that's the image that I have to cultivate. That I have some kind of a power over things, and I can only cultivate that image if you don't know that the way the world really works. So for Avraham Avinu, no, my mission is to tell everybody the truth. Bilaam says, no, my mission is to cover the truth, so that I can stay in business. So for Bilaam, it's an existential threat to Jewish people. He's got to get rid of them. That's why it says he hates them more. But you can now see why the Chazal, why Rashi, and why even the Torah is comparing Bilaam to Avraham Avinu. Because in many ways, they are the same. So now to the Rashi at the beginning of the parasha. So the Rashi in the beginning of the parasha was that the nations of the world can complain to Hashem and say, you didn't send us a Navi. You never sent us a prophet. And now Hashem can say, well, I did send you one, but look what he did. He was no good. He wasn't a good prophet. So what answer can Hashem give? So why can't the nations of the world say back to Hashem, well, why not sending us a good one next time? Why can't they? It's still not a good answer, right? If somebody says, I came to your house and you didn't serve me any food, and they put rotten food. Okay, well, you still didn't serve me any good food. You served me rotten food. So it's not an answer to say I sent you Bilaam. Bilaam's no good. And Hashem says, and look what your Nevi did. He did all these bad things. So the Jews could say, the nations of the world can say, yeah, well, that's a proof that you didn't really send us a fair deal. Because where's our good Nevi, like Moshe Rabbeinu?
Wasn't it really fair because he gave them both Avraham and both Balaam had the same opportunities. They both came from the same place. They both got the same kind of Nevoie. They both had the intellect to know that the world runs differently. They came with the same potential. Hashem gave them both the same opportunity. It was Avraham, just happened. He came and addressed his potential this way, and Bilaam addressed his potential that way. But it wasn't like it's not like.
Right, but why is that an answer to the people? That's not their fault. They didn't decide Bilaam what Bilaam was going to do.
That's how your nation became. It's not like. That's just a difference between nations. That's Avraham nation is that way, your nation is that way.
So Bilaam is representative of the mindset of the nation.
Exactly, I would say that's what it is. The culture, the values of the nation.
Right.
In other words, the culture of the nation is a selfish, manipulative kind of culture. Then even if I send you a Navi, what kind of Navi is he going to be? Somebody who gets the knowledge, but then covers up as much of it as possible in order to use it to his advantage. And you see that's what Bilaam did. Bilaam didn't even tell them the direct message that he got from Hashem. He told them as little as possible of what he actually had heard, and then only when he goes to try to speak does Bilaam, reveal the truth. And of course, getting Balaq more infuriated each time. If you've ever noticed, Bilaam, there were 3 times that with the donkey, right? Bilaam has to hit the donkey 3 times, right? And if you've ever noticed, 3 times Bilaam tries to curse the people unsuccessfully. So really, Bilaam is the donkey. The donkey is Bilaam, right? In other words, the whole donkey is supposed to be sort of a preview. Right? Some of the Mefarshim say it happened in a Mare Nevoie. It wasn't even, it didn't happen physically. It was a vision. But it doesn't even matter whether it was a vision or whether it happened physically. It's actually the preview. It's the trailer of Bilaam. Because each time Bilaam tries to force the donkey to do something that it doesn't want to do because it sees the malach, and it keeps moving and it keeps hitting it 3 times till finally it just stops. What happens with Bilaam? Balaq keeps pushing him, go over here, go over here, go over here, and then finally he just gives up. So really, in a way, the Torah has a sense of humor. It's saying you're a donkey, you're like the donkey. Right? You thought that you were riding the donkey, but really something else was driving you all along. And there's a very, very deep idea and lesson to be learned from the story of Bilaam, which is that we have a tendency, when we know something, when you know something, it gives you a superiority over other people who don't know it, right? And sometimes it's very, very tempting to want to keep it to yourself. You say, this knowledge that I have makes me better than somebody else. I don't want to give them that knowledge. Then they're going to be equal. If I teach that person to do what I can do, then they're going to put me out of a job, right? Or they're going to take over my position. If they're as good as I am, maybe they'll be better than me, and then then they'll compete with me, and everybody will like them more. Who did that happen with? Somebody like Shaul and David. Shaul sees that David has skill dealing with Goliath, right? He has a little bit of potential. Maybe he could go lead the army. He eventually leads the army, and he outshines Shaul. And then Shaul doesn't like that. That's not, nobody wants that to happen. So many people will have knowledge, or they'll have expertise, or they'll have some talent, and they say, I don't want to give my ability over to that other. I don't want to divulge my secret recipe. If I tell you my secret recipe, everybody will be able to make it. And then nobody will know that's my secret recipe anymore, or my secret formula. Whatever it is that gives you your value. But one of the lessons of Bilaam is, at least when it comes to real chokhmah, okay, in your business and it makes sense that you have to, if something belongs to you, you have a right to use it and to compete with it. But when it comes to knowledge of Torah, when it comes to knowledge of Hashem, we never say that we're going to keep it to ourselves. It says, Lo yimna tov mi be'alav. You shouldn't hold back good from those who are entitled to it, the pasuk says. Which means everybody's entitled to Yidiyat Hashem. That's what we believe. Everybody's entitled to knowledge of Hashem. Just like in America, they believe everyone's entitled to an education, right? That's why you have public education for people who can't afford private. So we say everybody's entitled to knowledge of Hashem. And if you have knowledge of Torah, you can't keep it away from others, because you say, well, if I start teaching that guy, he's going to be a bigger chacham than me. And then I'm going to lose my stature. That's thinking like Bilaam. If you do that, you're thinking like Bilaam. That's exactly what Bilaam said. If I start teaching people the truth, think of what great zechut Bilaam could have had if he had done the opposite and he started educating the nations of the world. But you didn't even think of that because you came from a culture where everybody was out for themselves. We, as people of chesed is not just in the material things that we give, it's also in Torah. If you know something, you should share it. You should impart it to other people. Don't think you're making the other person better than you. It's like it says about a candle, right? One candle can light another one. It's not diminished. The first candle's not diminished from lighting another one. If anything, if you take one candle and then you light an entire bonfire, you get credit for something even bigger than what you had. Let's say you teach somebody, and that somebody that you teach becomes even greater than you. Wonderful. You had a part in producing somebody even greater than you. That's the way that we should look at it. That's the way that Avraham Avena would look at it. And the way that Bilaam would look at it is, no, somebody being better than me means that I am, I want to keep my proprietary rights over the knowledge that I have. And you see that even when he describes in his Nevoie, he says, I am the person that's Yodea Dat Elyon. I'm the one that knows the knowing of the knowledge of the Most High. I'm the one that sees the truth of Hashem. I'm the one that, has the visions of Hashem. In other words, it was really important to him that he be the one. What does Moshe Rabbeinu say? When Eldad and Medad are having Nevoah, they're having prophecy outside the camp, what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? And Yehoshua comes and says, Adoni Moshe Kilahem. Moshe Rabbeinu, you should not tolerate this insubordination that Eldad and Medad are having prophecy outside the camp. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? Umi ten kol am Hashem nevi'im. I wish everybody were a Navi. That would be my dream. If everybody could be a Navi like me. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to keep it to himself. He wants everybody to be able to attain that level. And that's the way spiritually we should be. That we should take our spiritual gates and share them and inspire other people and not feel that it makes us better than other people, so we want to keep it to ourselves. We should be Talmidav Shel Avraham Avena. Thank you.